Hi, this is Daniela Cambone, and welcome to this very special edition of StansberryInvestor.com. We have a fantastic guest for you today. We are talking about the IMF's special drawing rights, the international reserve asset created in 1969 to prepare for a new dollar crisis. Well, my guest today says it is undergoing a renaissance with important worldwide repercussions. Please welcome back to the show, Willem Middelkoop. He is the author of The Big Reset, and he's also the founder of the Dutch-based Commodity Discovery Fund. And he is who Max Keiser calls the Oracle of Amsterdam. Our last interview was a tremendous hit. I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. So welcome back, Willem.
Well, great to be back. I received wonderful feedback. I think we had 300,000 views within 2 weeks, and well, it was a great experience.
Yes.
So glad to be back.
Well, I had to bring you back because I read with great interest your recent article, which is focused around the SDR. And we're going to break it down for the folks at home because I understand it is a technical subject, but it's an important one to understand because it's not a topic that's covered generally in the mainstream media. So let's talk about the special drawing rights and why it may be having a great revival here.
Yeah, the SDR is a bit a technical subject, but it is important because as many people who follow macro a little bit more know, the SDR was developed in the late 1960s by the IMF, and it was developed because the IMF was afraid a dollar crisis might occur in the early 1970s, and the IMF was afraid for this dollar crisis because the US promised in 1944 at the Bretton Woods conference that the dollar would be as good as gold, and more countries were, well, exchanging their surplus dollars for gold in the late 1960s, and this made the US default on their promise, and in August 15, 1971, President Nixon told the US public in a live broadcast that he would stop the possibility to convert US dollars into physical gold, and that created a dollar crisis. IMF was afraid of this, this happening, and they always thought that there should be a successor for the dollar. There should be an international currency not connected to one country, which could be developed into a world reserve currency, and that's the history of the SDR.
And right now, we have seen the largest ever allocation in SDR, which you say will greatly improve the liquidity of many developing nations, but it also signals alignment between the US and China in a key area of global monetary power. So I want to understand this. Why, what was the impetus? What was the reason for the increase? Was the pandemic the justification?
Yeah. There are so many countries calling on the IMF now for financial support. And the IMF only has, max 1 trillion of assets available, and that's not enough to support all countries and all countries in need. So a new trick was needed for the IMF to be able to create new reserves. And the IMF states in one of the press releases that this new allocation of SDR is a substantial and direct liquidity boost to all member countries without adding debt burdens. So it envisioned this as a new layer which has been built on top of the fiat money system. So the IMF can create their own assets now, reserves, in SDR out of thin air, and can distribute this among member countries, and they can add it to their balance sheet. So it's a new layer of fiat money.
Wow. So it's more than triple, right? It's like at least 500 billion.
Yeah, that's correct. Because I told you that the SDR was created in the late 1960s. But ever since, only a good 200 billion SDR were created in the last 50, 60 years. And after the Lehman crisis, it was China's wish and also the United Nations wish that the IMF would use its virgin balance sheet. The balance sheet of the IMF is very, very small compared to the balance sheet of all central banks. And it was China's wish and the United Nations wish that the IMF would use its balance sheet by creating large amounts of SDR to be able to provide liquidity for the world's financial system. And in the last 60 years, only 200 billion of SDR were created, and now they can create another 500 to 600 billion. So the size of all SDRs ever created is being tripled. And it was highly political because the last administration, the Trump administration, was very opposed to this idea. And as soon as Janet Yellen was installed as the
Treasury Secretary,
she wrote a letter to the G20 and calling for this SDR solution, and that's why the G20 immediately approved this, and now the IMF can create this amount of SDR.
Okay, so I want to drill down on that point about Janet Yellen and why the Trump administration didn't want it. So this is basically, from my understanding, throwing a major life raft to member countries, right? So they're obviously benefiting, but who loses in this? Who's paying the price here, Willem?
Nobody. And that's the great thing about this trick. We build a new layer of fiat money. In which nobody loses, but we create more fiat money out of thin air. So it increases the debasement of world currency. Because if you look at the content of the SDR is a currency basket. And within this basket, there are dollars and euro and yen and renminbi and British pounds. So when we create more SDR, we also create more of these 5 major currencies. So it's another round of debasement of currencies, but it's in an indirect way, so it's hidden.
Why didn't the Trump administration want this?
I think that this has to be viewed from the direct conflict between the US and China. So China has been a supporter and has been very vocal in the last 12 years to use the SDR, to upgrade the SDR, so we can use the SDR as a successor for the dollar. We can use it to price oil and gold and commodities. We can use it as a unit of account. And the US, of course, is afraid to lose its role as the leader of the financial system. So that was behind this. And the Chinese are very, very happy to see that the Biden administration is much softer on this. And of course, this gives much more power to the IMF as well, because the IMF can grow their balance sheet, and the IMF can grow towards a world central banker. And this is something which is very interesting for the future, because in the Big Reset, I wrote, that's the core thesis, that you'll need a central world bank to create enough liquidity to solve the problems we're all facing now.
This is making sense to me now. Was the 500 billion just unleashed, or is it unleashed in phases? Where are we at in
This just in one day, it's created and it's added to the accounts of all member countries.
So when are these repercussions felt? Okay, because if there's a debasement of currencies, when do we see this translated onto, competing currencies like gold, silver, the cryptocurrencies? Would this not bode well for other assets?
Well, we talk about this now, but there are many very smart insiders in this financial system who understand this and are acting on these developments. So if you will ask me, why are stock markets going up every day? Why is Bitcoin going up every day? I'll point out that the debasement of currencies is ongoing, and more and more of the smart money. We see that here in our office in the Netherlands as well. The inflows into our fund have increased by 5x, 10x, because people understand you need to move money now away from bank accounts, and you need to
get out of the system. That's
you need to leave the paper assets and go to the hard assets, and Bitcoin is a digital hard asset, so that explains the run to Bitcoin as well.
So with this information you have, Willem, and as an investor yourself, are you totally out of cash?
Yeah, as a fund, we have always very limited cash. Personally, I was always advising people to keep 25% of their assets very liquid in cash. But I've been advising people to at least use 30 to 50% of these cash holdings to put them into Bitcoin or buy more of gold and silver physical holdings.
And like we were talking offline, and Willem will come back for an in-depth gold and silver talk, but I can't help but go there right now because as I've brought up in the past, gold has been in a corrective phase since August here, Willem. So do you think, as we're about to, well, we've just started spring, but summertime tends to be a good time for gold. Do you think we could see it retest highs again this summer? And on the news of this SDR, when will that kind of show up in the price of gold?
Yeah, I always show our investors a presentation or a piece of research of the Bank of America from last year. And the Bank of America they expected gold to reach $3,000 within 18 months. This was published in the summer of 2020. We've had a long technical correction in gold, started in early August. GDX is down over 35%. Fortunately, our fund is still up a bit because we are diversified. We're not only investing in precious metals. But once this correction is over, I think we're in a very, very last phase. It could be over next week or in the next few weeks. And once we'll have a breakout in the precious metal space, I expect gold to return towards 2000 quite fast, like we've seen with Bitcoin after Bitcoin broke the downtrend and we had a huge run. You could expect something similar in gold, especially in silver, because of the ongoing silver short squeeze. There's a very, very delicate situation in silver markets now, and I wouldn't be surprised when gold goes over 2000 later this year or next year. We could have this run towards $2,500 or even $3,000 like the Bank of America expects.
Willem, let's just give the folks a sneak peek, because we will be talking about the silver squeeze and what that will do to the price. And there's this debate now, silver can't be squeezed, silver can be squeezed. I'm pretty sure I know which camp you fall on, but if you could just tease a bit of what we'll be talking about here.
Well, I always listen very well to my mentor, and that's Eric Sprott. And Eric Sprott, the Canadian investor, well-known Canadian billionaire. He retired now, but he's still quite active. And he always said, once the paper silver system breaks down, you will see a run towards $100 silver within a very short time. It's a very explosive situation, has been there for years. It will always take a little longer, but once it fills, it will run a little faster.
Well, I can't wait for that episode. So we'll get you booked up to tape that next. But thank you so much for joining me today. I definitely learned a lot. Thank you for breaking down the SDR for us and its significance and why it's really having a renaissance moment here. Willem Middelkoop, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for watching this edition of StansberryInvestor.com. We'll have much more for you. So in the meantime, share us where you watch it. That's it for me. I'm Daniela Cambone.